Although we live in a time and place in which access to resources in order to address psychiatric issues is relatively ubiquitous, the anxiety and trepidation that comes with the label crazy or sick prevents many people with treatable disorders from perhaps even admitting to themselves that they need assistance in managing their illness. According to the American Psychological Association, because of those prejudices and misunderstandings, many people are afraid to go public with their illness or seek help. Of the 28 million people who needed treatment for drug and alcohol problems in 2013, fewer than 1 in 10 people got help, the report says. Untreated disorders led to an estimated $417 billion in annual costs related to lost productivity, crime, and healthcare. It is absolutely necessary for us as individuals to engage in actively reversing the stigma attached to mental illness in our society. History has never been particularly sympathetic to individuals with atypical neurochemistry. Straying from societally imposed norms has been grounds throughout the ages for accusing a person of lacking mental capacity, and sometimes resulted in that individual's loss of their basic right to agency, personal agency. Unfortunately, in the modern era of mental health care, Western medicine's approach to mental health has been, until relatively recently, disturbingly cruel and dehumanizing. In a text published in 1992, Stigma and Mental Illness, published by the American Psychiatric Press, a team of doctors of several fields relating to mental illness and our mental health care and the mental health care industry produced a carefully composed report of the plight that a person with the mental health issues lives with every day. In discussing the many forms of prejudice that manifest and subsequently produce the stigmatized connotation of psychiatry and psychiatric care that exists in our culture and in cultures around the world, Stigma states, in hospital settings, psychiatrists and mental health care workers perpetuate the concept of stigma. Psychiatric units are established with the expectation of bizarre, aberrant, and out-of-control behavior. The now 25-year-old text concludes with a strong appeal to those in the mental health care industry. If we can help patients recover or significantly improve functioning, we have helped reduce stigma. Stigma is a pervasive national and international problem, an insidious problem that is destructive to families, mentally ill patients, and the profession of psychiatry. We can and we must change this course. By normalizing mental health care and putting the same emphasis on mental and emotional health as we do physical health, we can erase the stigma that overshadows the fundamental importance of practicing self-care for mentally ill individuals. When a person feels safe and supported rather than villainized and objectified, they can pursue the help they need to establish a route to rehabilitation. 19th and 20th century history is riddled with the forgotten souls of those who suffered at the hands of an unsympathetic society. In a book entitled American Psychosis, How the Federal Government Destroyed the Mental Illness Treatment System by E. Fuller Torrey, MD, Dr. Torrey explores the federal government's role in mental health care industry. It opens with the story of the largely unknown and intentionally buried Rosemary Kennedy, a beautiful and presumably schizophrenic sister of President John F. Kennedy. Joe Kennedy was a prominent political figure in Boston in the early to mid 20th century that had 9 children with his wife Rose. Close in age to Jack, Rosemary's mental capacity reportedly was that of a 4-year-old's. Joe, being a prideful man with a reputation to protect, in addition to the aspiration he had for his son John to take executive office, permitted his daughter Rosemary to be treated with a lobotomy, one of the earliest performed in American history, in which the connections to and from her prefrontal cortex on the interior part were scraped and cut away, resulting in permanent incapacitation. In a book that illustrates the life of Joseph Kennedy, The Sins of the Father, Joseph P. Kennedy and the Dynasty He Founded by Robert Kessler, Rosemary's surgeon describes what the young girl endured in the time of mental health treatment. We went through the top of the head. I think she was awake. She had a mild tranquilizer. I made a surgical incision in the brain through the skull, which made a small incision no more than an inch. We estimate how far to cut based on how she responded. Once she became incoherent, they stopped. The effect of Rosemary's lobotomy was not only devastating for her as an individual, left unable to take care of herself in the most basic ways, and lacking the ability of mobility and speech, Joe's unilateral decision to take care of Rosemary's illness had a profound effect on his family. Biographers with access to the Kennedys' correspondence through the time notice a glaring absence of any mention of Rosemary whatsoever. And for 20 years, she was basically forgotten by the family until her mother started visiting her family. But Joe, who was responsible for her incapacitation, never did. In a journal entitled Healthcare Policy in Contemporary America, contributor Gerald Grob It explores deinstitutionalization and the illusion of public policy regarding mental health care. Beginning with the notion that mental asylums in the mid-20th century were, at the time, a sign of an enlightened society, Grove establishes that by 1940 there was a vast and costly inpatient population of 450,000 individuals under the care of state hospitals. In the era of World War II, these institutions had been the receptacles for not only psychotic, but more often senile, elderly people that the government relied on for over a century, and they began losing their reputation of legitimacy. Communities shifted the focus of mental health treatment from treatment to prevention by addressing the social issues that led to institutionalizing. But decades of financial neglect on the parts of the states left the mental wards underfunded, ineffective, and particularly tumultuous particularly after the tumultuous economic collapse of the Great Depression and global conflicts of World War II. So, considering I have to wrap up here, I will just say real quick that President John F. Kennedy was, right before he assassinated, one of the first presidents to establish a mental health care system. And after that, we had a number of presidents trying to create these community health care centers. After Nixon, they were gutted, and then when he was impeached, they revisited the idea of these centers. But ultimately, with President Reagan, he cut 25% of the national federal funding for mental health institution care and took all of the programs, federal programs, and turned them into one block program, which just, the attempts to help mentally ill people before were problematic, but this was disastrous. And this is why, before the 80s, your parents might recall that there was the homeless population was just incredibly less. The reason for this was because of deinstitutionalization. All of them, without a place to go, without an institution, they were left on the streets. And very often you have addiction, mental illness, and homelessness all playing into one thing. So by doing this, we're stigmatizing these people, and very often you see a person on the freeway exit, and more often than not, it seems like in society we want to treat these people with fear before sympathy. And honestly, of course, I'm screwing it up now. When a person feels as though they have been given up on, they are like an unwanted burden on the world. Is it really so difficult to see how that person may subsequently make unhealthy or morally ambiguous decisions? Moreover, with the current framing of mental health and the way in which popular culture treats so-called crazy people, is it any surprise that there's profound apprehension felt across all walks of life in admitting publicly, not only publicly, but to oneself, that they might need psychiatric help? We can and we must change the attitudes of those ignorant to the harsh realities of mental illness by educating people and coming from a place of compassion.